This episode of Recruiting Future Roundup is sponsored by Vonk. Vonk supports global enterprises worldwide to drive efficient hiring through AI-powered job distribution and recruiting intelligence. Vonk recently unveiled Echo, a new AI agent ecosystem designed to make overwhelmed TA teams and outdated funnels a thing of the past. Echo rebuilds the hiring process for speed, clarity, and fairness without losing human control. To find out more, you can go to vonk.com. And Vonk is spelled V-O-N-Q. So that's vonk.com. Welcome to Recruiting Future Roundup, which once more is coming to you live. If you've not watched Roundup before, it's where me and my guest dig into the episodes that have been published on Recruiting Future in the last month, so you don't miss out on any insights that the guests are sharing. And also, if you've not listened to those episodes, you can choose which ones you want to go back and have a deeper dive into. So we're looking at 6 episodes in this roundup, and I am once more joined by my very good friend and special guest, Mervyn Dinnen, analyst, fellow podcaster, and also co-author. Hi, Mervyn, how are you doing?
Hi, Matt. Thank you for inviting me on again. And I'm doing good. It's exciting start to the year it's been. There seems to be lots happening. The world of TA never rests.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been an interesting January, even though the weather has been pretty terrible, but that's to be expected, particularly as I live in Scotland. So but we did have some interesting joint news this January, because we both received a copy of this in the post, which is the Turkish translation of our book Digital Talent. Digital Talent came out a few years ago, but the Turkish translation has just come out. So if you're in Turkey or if you're a Turkish speaker, the book is now available to you. So, that was a kind of an exciting and almost unexpected development, because I think we've both forgotten that it was being translated.
But yes, we gave the rights to translate, seemed ages ago, but there it is, out in the wild.
Absolutely. So let's get cracking with the episodes that we had in January. So first up, to start the year, was episode 758, and kicked off the year with Jonathan Kestenbaum from AMS. If you're not sort of listened to or watched John's work before, there's probably no one else in the industry who looks at as much TA technology as he does. So he pretty much, his job is to basically evaluate everything that's going on in the market. So it's always great to have him on the podcast, because he can give a really sophisticated view of where we are and where we're going. It was a bit of a prediction episode. He did a prediction episode for us last year, so judged him on his predictions from last year, which is always a good thing to do. And he talked about some of his, what he thinks is going to happen in the next sort of 12 months. But Mervyn, what were the sort of big takeaways for you from this particular episode?
There were certainly a few. As you say, Jonathan is very much on top of this stuff. And I suppose the first point was that AI will not deliver kind of meaningful value in TA by itself. It's only really, I suppose, going to deliver returns when organizations redesign how work is done kind of around AI, and also you're through continuous transformation, reskilling, and I suppose reshaping their operating model. 2026 isn't just about better tools, but it's about building I think he referred to something like organizational muscle or something. As AI kind of reshapes so much about what we do.
Yeah, I think that was the sort of big takeaway of me. For me, it was about the importance of workforce planning, and why a lot of sort of attempted AI transformation isn't working, because people don't have a sophisticated talent plan in place around having the right skills, reskilling people. And also, I think one of the things that we've talked about on the show before is that AI isn't taking jobs away, it's taking tasks away. So it's taking bits of jobs away, which is a really complicated thing to deal with if you don't have an effective sort of talent plan. So, I think it was a really sort of great observation, and I think it kind of explains a lot of what we're seeing. I think the other thing that really stood out for me and really made me think actually was he sort of mentioned at one point we were talking about resumes and how they haven't changed in hundreds of years and all the usual kind of narrative about them, not being very useful, but not going away. And he pointed out that a resume is like it is because it's basically defined by limits. It's defined by the amount of time that a recruiter and a hiring manager has to actually review it, which is why it's a short summary. And the thinking was in a world of AI where AI can ingest so much information so quickly, why limit it to 2 pages? Why not make it unlimited in terms of the amount of information that's kind of being put across? And I thought it was an interesting point. I mean, what's your sort of take on that one, Merv?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think with the we have access to everything somebody has done, as opposed to what they decide to share with us they have done. And I think one of the things that I think relates to this that he was talking about was that hiring manager experience becoming a key indicator of effectiveness.
Yes.
How well recruiters can translate business needs into, I suppose, successful hires. But some of that comes with, I think, really understanding, the candidate and what they have done, what they're not just kind of what their list of jobs are, but the real their understanding, their ability to translate that into effective hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd still be dealing with a summary ultimately, but that summary would be based on a huge amount of information, which presumably the candidate would consent to share, which is then tailored to illustrating why they'd be a great fit for that job. So it's an interesting one, and I think it's something we'll come back to actually a bit later because there's another sort of episode where the interview sort of goes over similar ground to that one. So that was a really, really great episode to start the year, and I'd really recommend listening to that if you want a real sense of what's going on with AI. The next episode was 759, the return of friend of the show, Baz von der Hatred, who is in eternal competition with you, Mervyn, to have the most appearances on Recruiting Future. I think he's edged ahead now, but here you are again, coming back at him. And basically every year for the last, I can't even remember how many years it is, 15 years, 20 years. It says in the episode, it's a long time. Baz has done some really, really in-depth research into the state of corporate career sites, where he effectively has a group of people who go and apply for jobs, look at every single facet of corporate career sites, and really sort of then sort of really kind of summarize, what's changed, what the issues are, and over the course of his research, you can see how things have developed. So we do it every year. We just had a catch up about the research. What was really interesting this time was he flagged up that a lot of the problems we've had with career sites for a really long time, so terrible mobile interfaces, bad ATS integrations with broken links, seem to have now been fixed. And there was a real sense that actually we got to grips with some of the biggest problems that career sites have had. The problem is these are 2015's problems. And we now live in a very different world. We live in a different world where candidates have different expectations. And really, the career sites were not scoring well in terms of things like personalization, conversational AI, the kind of things that are now being expected in a job search. And really, I think that sums up perhaps the issue that we have in TA, that it takes a really long time to address the issues that are out there. And now the world is moving even quicker than we could even imagine a few years ago. What were your takeaways from this one?
I think what really struck me is there's a bit of a paradox there in that career sites are finally fixing the problems we've been complaining about for ages and ages. ATS implementations are getting better, ghosting is down, is progress. But at the same time, candidates are increasingly discovering and evaluating employers before they even get to a career site. AI now, anybody can say, what's it like to work at Recruiting Future? Or, is Recruiting Future a good podcast? Or we don't have to watch loads of episodes to see it's a good podcast. We can find out. So I think that it's it's almost this kind of thing that the risk is that organizations are now going to spend the next year or two perfecting almost a yesterday's experience,
Yeah.
when the real shift is to AI driven discovery and personalization and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's the issue, and that's one of the big challenges that I think we've got to face. Let's move on to episode 760. Now, this is an epic episode. We could do a whole roundup show about this one. So it was an interview with Simon Bishop, who is head of TA at Software One, and Ritu Mahankar, who's CEO at Vonk. And it's really it's a conversation in two parts. So the first part, Simon's talking about really a very kind of modern approach to employer brand activation in the world of TikTok and YouTube, and some of the really interesting recruitment marketing things that they've been doing, which, to be honest with you, is probably an episode in its own right. The second half, we get into this whole idea of co-creation and co-creating the future. And they talk about, Ritu and Simon talk about the story of how they basically, Vonk collaborated with Software One and some other partners to develop their new agentic AI offering. And I just thought, in a world that's full of vendors putting AI products out there to solve recruiting problems that very often you completely miss the mark, this was just such a great case study in a vendor working really, really closely with a TA team to kind of really refine, look at the problems they're solving, look at how the hiring managers were reacting, testing assumptions, looking at what the candidates were saying about it. And I just thought it was, it's just brilliant from that perspective. What did you think?
I think it was a very strong conversation, and the key points, the AI is strong enough now to do parts, to screen at scale and consistency way above what a human can. And it reduces noise, it prevents good candidates being missed, gives recruiters time to do human work, trust building, that kind of thing, judgment. So I think that it's the partnership is important. The also there's a consistency about it. So it's kind of we don't have this drop off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I think it's just a really interesting way of working, and the problems they solve and the product they come up with are worth a look. So again, would really recommend listening to that one, which is really two podcasts shoved into one. So two for the price of one. So next one, we are jumping to episode 762, which is called Moving from AI. No, we're not. I've missed one out. So we're not jumping. We're going to episode 761. What happens when recruiters embrace AI? Again, really, really interesting. And there's a real running theme running through all of the episodes in January. They were quite sort of carefully curated to really complement each other. So it's an interview with Dr. Ali Raza, who I met while I was on a trip to Dubai a couple of months ago. He's got a really interesting story. So he used to be an academic. He used to be a professor at university, but he's become a recruiter. And basically, listen to the podcast to hear the story about how that very strange shift happened. But the short version is that he has designed his own AI matching and screening tool, and he's just taken out to the market himself. And he's using it to run a recruitment business, which is him. And what's really interesting about this is the way that it's using technology to be really strong at what the technology is strong at. So, in this case, matching candidates with opportunities. So that's what his AI does. But what he then does is what humans are really strong at. So he builds a relation. He's recruiting for senior people in very hard to fill roles. And he builds a relationship with those people, just like recruiters should or do, or certainly did in the past. But also he then talks them through what their score was, what the AI said about their suitability for the job. And fills in the blanks, because ultimately the AI is going off a resume which has limited information. There may be information about their background that's not in there, and he fills that in conversations, and then gets a very, very clear picture of great candidates he matched. And he's had some brilliant some brilliant results from it. And it's just really interesting because it's just that combination of human and machine, in a way that might make some recruiters uncomfortable, because they might think they're better at matching than anyone in the world ever. But here we're kind of seeing really how AI and humans can work together to be better for everyone. And I just think it's a fantastic story. Mervyn, as a former recruiter, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. There are now screening tasks where AI can easily outperform humans. In scale, consistency, and being able to assess against multiple criteria across
Yeah.
thousands of applications. And his story, you're right, is really interesting. And it's kind of, I suppose, one of the points is about what volume does to behavior. That with volume, recruiters start to take shortcuts. They might sample a portion. They might have 700 applications, and they might, somehow only maybe assess a small proportion of that, because they can't process the rest. Where AI can evaluate everybody consistently against agreed, criteria, and spot relevant experience, even when I suppose it was interesting because it's kind of, even if it's not described in the way you would expect it. So it's kind of somebody hasn't described their experience really well, but AI will know they've got that experience.
Yeah,
or be
exactly.
able to see that they've got that experience.
And then he was filling in the gaps with conversations, and I think that's a really interesting point. It was like 700 people applied. A recruiter might stop looking at candidates after number 50 if they feel they've got a great shortlist. What if the best fit for that job ever is number 650 to apply? They never even get looked at. So, I think it's a really, really great story. I mean, there's obviously a question about, how do you do this at scale? Because he's very much doing this with senior roles where there is the opportunity to spend that one-on-one time with candidates. But then I guess that's what some of the other case studies that we've got in this month have been looking at, how you do that at scale. So really, 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 really interesting. And absolutely, check this one out if you want to see what the future of being a recruiter just might be like. Now we're going to move on to episode 762, which again, moving from AI hype to value. So another approach to AI, different market. Interview with Max, who is the CEO of a company called Mackie People. They work with some very, very big employers with really kind of high volumes of applications. And again, just a really interesting story about what is actually happening on the ground with this technology, what it's doing to recruiting, what the case studies look like, all that sort of stuff. Now, I think the interesting thing for me was one of the big focuses that Mackie has is on giving the best possible candidate experience. And one of the examples that's quoted is one of their clients is a massive retailer who gets 1.6 million applications every year. They reject 98% of those people. However, their kind of promoter scores, the candidate's kind of happiness with the brand is still very high because the candidate experience is so good. And I think this is really important because we need to talk about this, because at the moment, I think a lot of the commentary in the space is focused, not incorrectly, but is focused on, various potential legal cases and regulations and things that are going on. The kind of the more mainstream media is sometimes, when it looks at AI interviews and those kind of things, focuses on, some anecdotes and some vox from people who had a terrible experience and think it's a horrible thing. Computer says, no, we don't want to be in this kind of world. But actually here, what we're seeing is candidates are getting a fantastic experience, and the hiring managers are getting a great experience. And it's just really, really kind of helping to improve recruiting. And I think it's something that, we need to talk about more, so we can, get that understanding of the advantages out there, but also hold all the vendors out there to this kind of high level of, this is what the candidate experience needs to be. It needs to be better than it was. Otherwise, what's the point of bringing in this technology? So there's me going off on one. What do you think, Mervyn?
You pretty much said it, so I'll try. I'll try and think of something else to say. No, it is fascinating, and I think, if we go back, if you and I go back years and years, when we first started talking about this stuff online on social media, or things like Twitter and stuff, we always was about how the candidate experience, that link between how a candidate's treated when they apply for a job and how they're treated when they're a potential customer. And that all the people we give a really bad experience to when they apply for a job are potential customers. The potential advocates, the potential, it's kind of like, I didn't get the job, but what a great company they are. I'd recommend them to anybody because of the way they treated me. And we kind of, with volume, we lose a lot of that. Particularly recruiters, TA people under pressure to fill roles. It's only the people who maybe fit the criteria that you focus on. But I think that we're still making hiring. I think one of the things that Max was saying is we're still making hiring decisions with signals from the past.
Yes,
CVs, keywords, gut feel, and kind of it's improving the candidate experience. Even for rejects, even for people who aren't going to be right, we know at the beginning aren't going to be right, to give them something to take away, to say, actually, it's a great company. I didn't get as far as an interview, but I could just tell the way they treated me was really good. And I think it's the kind of, there's too much almost still unstructured process, particularly in volume recruitment, which we shouldn't really have. So I think that the kind of metrics that really matter, candidate experience, recruiter efficiency, time to hire, are important. But I think that that at its heart, the CV is almost the core failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to this again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. I think it's just going to dominate what we talk about. What we talk about this year. To me, I think this is the year where we finally get some understanding and traction in that particular area. And I think just case studies like this with some sort of really big companies doing great stuff is the thing that moves it forward.
Yeah, and I think that there is a belief that AI just speeds up hiring. But it doesn't, because it really changes what we assess to see if the candidate is right, how we go about it, as opposed to just, we can process people quicker now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, so we don't sound like just two cheerleaders for everything to do with AI ever. I think we need to caveat that, there are lots of instances of AI being used out there that aren't good, that aren't transparent, that are not doing what they should. And I think that, again, the great thing about the interviews that we did on the podcast in January is they kind of really sort of told this story about everything from transformation to regulation to making things better, and showing just how great it can be, which brings us nicely onto the final interview that we're going to talk about, which was episode 764, with an author and a consultant called Steve Wonka. He's written a book called AI and the Octopus Organization, which he's co-authored with a guy called Jonathan Brill, who ran AI labs at Amazon. So, two kind of very experienced people writing this. And it kind of goes back to the interview with John Kesterman that we talked about right at the beginning of this conversation, in terms of how do you make AI change work in an organization. And the premise of the book is that octopuses, octopi, is it octopi? How do you say that? What's the plural octopus? I need to ask my 10-year-old. He'll correct me on this.
It could be octopi.
Could be, couldn't it? Yeah, there we are. Don't know, but I need to ask AI, but I can't because I'm on camera. Right. So anyway, an octopus has a number of different brains, and effectively it has brains in its tentacles, so they can operate independently to the rest of the octopus. It's really quite interesting, fascinating creatures. And what they're saying in this book is actually for AI to work properly, it needs to be kind of organic, come from the grassroots. Every division needs to be owning and driving innovation with a kind of a central a central view on it as well. It can't just come from the top of an organization, and distributed innovation is what they call it. And we cover a lot on this in the episode, so I won't go into it too much. Take a listen and you can hear what we were talking about. But the big conclusion I came out with was, from a talent acquisition perspective, talent acquisition has a real chance to lead change in this area, because recruiting is very much at the cutting edge of what's happening with AI in organizations, certainly AI within the talent part of organizations. And I think it's TA's chance to kind of really lead here rather than trying to follow. So a really kind of interesting message to finish with. Mervyn, what was your take on the octopus?
It was fascinating. You're right. I mean, it's something that it is well, it's well thought out, and it's a very good, calling it the octopus thing, organization rather, is very well thought out, because it's the of all the different potential strands. So I mean, it's I think that it is very interesting. I think that a lot of organizations will probably struggle to really adopt something like this. But I think that they need to, I think organizations now need to be very open-minded about how they adopt this and how they implement it and how they use it. Who owns AI transformation within the organization, for example, things like that, I think is now becoming very important. It's kind of, and in fact, it's one of the thoughts I had about this was that this isn't really just about AI in the flow of work. It's almost about, changing. It's almost changing, how decisions are made, who makes them, what information is used to make decisions, what speed we make decisions at. It's kind of I think there's a lot more of that in it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a great way to close January. So that's it. That's Roundup. Mervyn, thank you very much for your input and insight on this one. We are already into February, and there will be another set of interviews on Recruiting Future, but with some new themes, and also digging deeper into some of the themes that we've already talked about. It tells me that 2026 is going to be a very interesting year. So make sure you follow and listen to Recruiting Future. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find the website at recruitingfuture.com, where you can search all the past episodes and find the episodes that we've talked about in this show. So Roundup will be back live this time next month. So all it remains me to say is a big thank you to Mervyn for coming along and sharing his thoughts.